Welcome everyone to the Think Different podcast. It is time, one more time, for more union talk because we can't get enough of the negativity in this world. No, we have to continue down that path, and we are here again with Mr. Keto Frank Funke, but I don't introduce him that way, no. I call him the former Apple creative, retired book publisher, soccer mom recorder, Jurassic Park owner, black coffee drinker, jury number 12, the retirement home president, the Keto Trout Jumper. Mr. Frank Funke is here.
Hey, good to be back, man.
In case you don't know who I am, my name is Will V. I am the owner of WV Productions. If you have a wedding, a Sweet 16, a funeral, I am the right guy to film that event. But we are not alone this week. No, I had to get this flow going of somebody who may not have the same opinions as our last show, and if you haven't heard our last show, please make sure you subscribe and download that episode. We also have it on our YouTube channel, which we just reached over 1,000 subscribers. That means we're making money, Frank, and every time we make money, every time we get that $100 mark, me and you are going to go out, we're going to have a nice tomahawk steak.
Wait a minute, are we going to bring the ladies?
No, they had nothing to do with the success of this.
Oh, that's not
absolutely
true.
not.
You can speak for yourself, Will. My wife has been a big inspiration.
Okay, well, she was only on one episode, so it doesn't count. All right, we'll give her. How about this? We'll let her have a piece of bread from the bread bucket. All right.
Oh, okay, that's good.
But we also have with us another gentleman who has been on the show. The last time we had him was on our 100th episode. He has returned. He used to work at Apple. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Vil is here.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, everyone.
And just remind everyone, Chris, what your roles were at Apple and how long you were there.
Yeah, so I was a tech specialist, or whatever the word, FRS, they called it. Then I was a genius, and total time there was just under 5 years, even though they gave me my 5-year plaque anyway.
Hey, you know what? You take that 5-year plaque. Signed and autographed by Mr. Tim Cook. You know, and I know he's definitely got to be a Zevia drinker, but we're going to take a drink here for the working man.
And I'm sure he signed every one of those.
Yes, I'm sure he did. Absolutely. I would love to take it to Pawn Stars. I would love to see if they could get their expert in, get their magnifying glass, and see if they really got.
What porn stars do you know?
Pawn Stars.
Oh
my God.
You got to speak up. My hearing's going at this.
Yeah, we know that, Freddie, because you were stuck. You know why? Because you've been in the pool every day, so the water is getting in your ears.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, last time we talked about Apple unions, and what we wanted to do this week was to get another opinion from someone that also worked there. And now, kind of a breaking story. I don't even know if Chris knows this, but there was someone that we all knew that worked at Apple who said something to someone who worked with him. He spilled the bean, and he was talking about another employee. He spilled the beans and to HR, put him on suspension, and then fired him. And that's like, you know, and based on the conversation I had with that person, it's really amazing to me how different this company is now, especially when all this is going on. That they are not taking anything lightly. Any little bit, I think, of wrongdoing or saying is going to affect you, and hearing the tale of this story makes me rethink now that when you're at an office and who you work with, can you be friends with them? Because it really, this era we're in now, especially if you have a different opinion about something, or if you say something the wrong way and it's taken the wrong way, you could lose your job so easily.
Shades of McCarthyism. Do you remember McCarthyism? Did you remember reading about that in your history books in school? When he was, everybody was a communist. You remember that? You don't remember that?
Yeah. So in the 1960s, basically anybody who was deemed as a communist was immediately jailed. And
well, I don't know about jail, but blackballed anyway. A lot of writers, screenwriters, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bad time. And for sure, there's a weird thing happening with our society of like things that are said, even if they don't have malicious intent, are taken as malicious intent.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So, like, I always bring this up as a quick example. Like, if a 5-year-old says, wow, that girl's got a big butt, right? Versus a, 40-year-old comes out and says, and he only lived in the forest and never saw a woman in his entire life, says, wow, that girl has a big butt, right? We take the 40-year-old as, oh, he should have had that life experience to teach him better. And unfortunately, sometimes they're idiots and they don't, right?
Well,
it's not malicious. It's just they don't know any better.
I'm just the host of a podcast. So I didn't really go to my history. I'm just a podcast host. So, but
you just failed that class. That's all it was. Well, come on.
Yes,
there's certain history I listen to.
Malicious intent needs to be taken.
Listen, man, I went to school in the 90s, okay, when none of this shit mattered, okay? So you could
we
really
don't worry about Pokemon and Power Rangers.
Right.
Like
professional wrestling.
Mel Brooks and Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, all those comedic writers. It's like, if we can't laugh at the most when Mel Brooks did History of the World and he did Hitler on Ice, and you have to laugh at that kind of stuff. If you can't, then everything is a conspiracy. Everything is out to get somebody else. And so what happens is then in the workplace, everybody says good morning, and that's it. And unless you have a direct interaction with a person, you don't tell them who you think is a good presidential candidate, who you don't talk politics, you don't talk religion. You just go in, do your job, and go home.
Right.
And it's a very sad environment.
Yeah,
even if you're just making a joke, you can't make a joke anymore.
No.
Yeah, I think society needs to figure out what the difference between malicious intent and not malicious intent is. 1,000%.
And people also can't be blamed for things that happened 20 years ago and then they get fired for it or anything. I mean, it's a different time. What I also want to share was a video that was published from a company called More Perfect Union, which seems to be a channel all about fighting for unions. And what they did, they interviewed a couple of the Apple retail workers, specifically from that Maryland store, which I'm surprised they were allowed to do without, I guess, getting fired. But this was posted on May 13th, so this is even before the decision, I think, came down. So I wanted to share this, and we're going to watch it here on YouTube, and for our audio package, you'll hear the audio. And we want you to, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Chris and Frank, because I'm going to kind of be the moderator, but I want Chris to explain some of the things that he believes why a union would work. Meanwhile, Frank is definitely more on the side of a union doesn't make a difference for anybody. So let's... Well, for Apple retail specifically.
He's not saying that. Yeah.
All right, so let's listen into this.
We talk about this country is like a place where democracy thrives, but we work 80% of our lives in an environment where we have no democracy. We have no vote in the things that affect us.
Apple has all the power, influence and money to be able to make a significant change in what labor is. It's an opportunity. Like, they didn't start it. They didn't begin this initiative themselves. We did. All they have to do is follow up.
I have been with Apple Towson for 7 years, and at the end of May,
8 years and some change. So 8.5 almost.
Over 10 years in, and it's like, whoa. I'm actually being honest with these feelings that have keep coming up over the years that I'm giving way more than is fair, really. April of 2018, we had this Batterygate incident. It was a very big deal, and the effect on the store was traumatic.
The tech giant admitted that it slows down older models.
Critics claim Apple did it to sell newer phones.
And this is pre-COVID, so we're talking sardines packed inside a tiny container of a store, and it boiling over. This anxiety of really just being yelled at constantly because of something I can't have any control over.
It's stressful. Yeah. We are kind of the face of a giant company. Especially over the course of the pandemic, people have become really reliant on their technology. And when they don't have, their thing that works, they get really emotional. And we tend to be the person who takes the brunt of that kind of frustration and anger and fear. And it can be a lot.
You're acting as like a therapist to people. Like, I've had people like cry on my shoulder. We've also had people threaten us, like with violence multiple times. It's retail work, it's sales, yeah, it's technical, yeah, but it's also like, there's just so much that you have to be able to be good at, to be able to know, to be able to anticipate.
We want to create an environment where the people who have a lot of really skilled labor are being compensated and being treated with that level of respect that they deserve.
How did you get involved in the union effort?
The league KG and I had like just conversations, about like what working looks like at other companies and then other countries as well.
The way that they teach you at Apple to like teach the job skills to one another is like how we did it with this information, right? We educated us first and then the right people in the right order.
Took it one person at a time and just talked to everybody at the store, and eventually we got enough people involved to make a difference.
Talking to like our coworkers about like what a union is, why do we need it? Like, this is the way that we can make things better.
We make so much money, Apple, $3 trillion company.
It does seem kind of like preposterous to me that our CEO can make as much money in 1 year as he does, and you still have people like struggling to find an apartment.
Does he do a lot of work? I'm sure. Is it worth $98 million when you have people at your store who are barely scraping by, who can't pay rent? Hiring a law firm that works with a company that has historically been extremely aggressive towards unionization efforts is troubling. I would hope that they live up to the code of conduct that they set for their suppliers.
The supplier code of conduct is on our damn website. It's this international agreement that we've signed on to, and have anybody that is like a vendor or a factory or whatever, if those workers decide to unionize or organize, Apple has a contract that says we can't get involved. Like, you can't do anything to stop that. So it's like,
at the end of the day, like, this isn't about being anti-Apple. Like, we love our jobs. We love what we do. Really what we're asking them to do is to lead the forefront and be a leading example when it comes to workers' rights.
Apple has the resources to really take care of employees. Use what you have for good. Like, you actually could do good. You could bring like dignity to this work.
If we want to be different, if we want to think differently, then maybe we should treat our labor differently. Be the shining example for what a great retail work environment can be. You look at the people at Amazon, the people at Starbucks, you see yourself in them and you go, wow, that could be me.
proof that we can do it. Why can't we do it too?
If you see a need for change, there is a way to do it. You might have to start it yourself.
There's, a revolution coming, and it's going to be one retail store at a time.
All right, so that was the video that was posted. I think CNET actually did it, and then I think they either reposted it.
Yeah, there's a few places that posted.
Yeah, so, and again, this was done before it officially went through that at the Maryland Townsend store, they are currently in negotiations regarding the union and what the terms are going to be. Now, of course, they could just say no, and then maybe this goes away, but depending on the terms. But we don't know, number one, each one of those people's roles. Number two, we don't know what terms.
We know at least one of them is a technical, right? Because you're not getting yelled at for battery repair unless you were an FRS or Genius.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think at some point everybody was getting yelled at regarding at one point or another with Battery Gate. But Battery Gate was also 4 years ago. Yeah. So, and a lot of these guys worked through that. And recently, Apple, to combat this, they gave a 10% raise for the inflation.
Up to 10%.
Up to 10%. I'm sure not everybody got that, but I'm sure the specialists did. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure who got it. But I would say a majority of people I talked to, they got 10%.
Yeah, and I think it depends on market, right? Because like our houses are for sure, and rent is for sure more expensive over here than
Right.
you know, like Kentucky, right?
Right.
Yeah, but
And also, just one thing, Frank, before I do that, before one thing too, Frank, is also they did change the hours that employees are, allowed to be, out of work. So if they work if they work till 10 p.m., they're not going to work the 8 o'clock shift. That's an example of something they just combated with that. But go ahead, Frank. What were you going to say?
Well, I wanted to address this cost of living in a particular area in relationship to your salary. Okay, that's a very double-edged sword. You have to be very careful there, because Apple across the board is paying their employees anywhere from $17 to $23, $25 an hour, right? Regardless of where you are. Now, if the people in New York or Seattle or wherever where the cost of living is higher, or Los Angeles, right? They say, well, we want more money. Well, okay, so where are they going to get that money? Do they then do a algorithm to say, well, our store in Quaker Bridge in Trenton, New Jersey, it's less expensive to live there, therefore we're going to lower their wages. Okay.
Well, I think with the $1 trillion company, I don't think there'd be lowering wages anytime soon. I understand on the smaller business aspect that could happen, like for Ford and stuff like that, when they're, getting government bailouts left and right, or General Motors when getting government bailouts left and right. That was a little bit different, and they did that. They did that to my father when he was working for General Motors for 20 years during the 2008 housing crisis. One of 3 that's been in my lifetime at this point. But I think what's important with this, right, is like, and this is my personal standpoint in this. They say like one retail store at a time. I don't know if it's necessary for every retail store. I'm certain there's some retail stores that are absolutely crapping on their employees with terrible managers. I don't know about you, Will, but we had, let's say if there was 12 managers we had on our time there, I would say 2 of them needed to get axed, and one of them did for sure.
Mm-hmm. When Frank got there, remember, Frank, when you got there, your entire team except your store leader was axed based on the.
No, store leader was axed too.
I mean, at Quaker Bridge, me.
Before we arrived.
Yeah, Quaker. That individual was axed, all but one manager.
Yep,
correct.
But I mean, I guess my point is that the things that they're talking about, there are no different in Apple than they are anywhere else. So, to me, I don't. If Apple was doing what its third parties are doing in terms of mining rare minerals and things like that, where they had that code of conduct, like, you're really going to compare the conditions in an Apple store to that code of conduct for third party? Give me a break.
For sure, there's definitely a little bit of ridiculousness there. However, I will say there were its moments. Do you remember? This was the year I was getting married, so that was 2017. There was a flu that went through the Genius bar, right?
Yeah, a lot of people got sick.
It got so bad. I actually considered and talked to management about contacting CDC, right. And when I did that, then they started getting the oxygen tests in there and all the other type of stuff, because they need to check out to see what was going on, because it was that bad, right? Other times that it was really bad was during the battery recall program. They put so many people into the Genius bar, and then they hired those
temp workers,
the temps, who caught the room on fire at least once a week, which I don't know if you know about breathing in lithium ion, but it's fucking awful for your health.
They weren't trained correctly at all.
I don't.
And then
one was asleep in his car.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people got turned around very quickly, and then they decided at one point that specialists had the option. No one was forced, but had the option to learn the skills of how to fix, which they definitely did much better because obviously they have a lot more care.
God, yeah.
And they have enough technical knowledge to understand it, which then led to what I think now we're at, why we have a lot of changes happen because of that program, especially from a mobile genius side to a concierge side to agreement side to documentation side. Like a lot of things changed for the better, might I add. Like, so as bad as this program was,
process.
But that was a process that Apple wasn't ready for, clearly.
Right. Exactly.
And to make people wait 3 hours to get a phone repair is beyond
that
crazy.
Exact reason was the reason why I had my life threatened by more than one person. I had a guy who was slamming his phone on the table, screaming, F Apple, F Apple, F Apple. And he was doing it in my face to the point where I clenched my fist, and one of the managers brought me to the back. He's like, you can go home. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the rest of your shift. You can just go home. Because he was about to get punched.
What's interesting about the whole thing, though, is that here we are, we're 4 years removed from that battery program.
Yeah.
And now it's all of a sudden becoming like something they're talking about, like as an example of that. And did Apple do anything to compensate these people? I mean, they gave us more overtime, maybe, but beyond that, they didn't really give us anything in return for the work that we did that whole year and a half of the battery program.
Okay,
Frank, did you perform battery repairs?
No, I did not.
No.
I'll concede you that point, but now answer me this. If there was a union, what would the union have been able to do?
It would have probably made sure that those temps didn't go in there. It could have actually made so our hours could be capped at 40 and bargained for more money after we went into overtime. Because we all did overtime on batteries. I put 70-hour work weeks in.
Right,
during that.
And you were paid overtime, right?
Yeah, that's taxed heavily. Okay. So I could have been bargained.
The union is not going to give you tax-free overtime.
For sure, but it could have been bargained for more overtime. You can do 200 times overtime. You can do 400 times overtime, depending on the thing. So it could have been bargained for, right?
And that would have to depend on what the collective bargaining agreement that's signed is only good for whatever it is, 3 or 5 years, whatever they could be every year. But
so nonetheless, not only did we have the battery program, but I think it's important to remember that Apple has always had repair extension programs that have gotten us yelled at.
Yeah.
Coding issue on the MacBook Pro.
Yep.
And the worst, so bad that they stopped making it, the butterfly keyboard.
Yeah. The unrepairable keyboard.
It was so bad that the moment they released a new model, it would immediately go onto the quality program. Yeah. So I'm looking right now about how many repair extension programs they have going on, right? Because we're all not working there now, but I can at least see it on service programs.
And they have private ones that they don't make public either that we wouldn't even know about. But they always, at least every device at least has one major one on there. So
I see at least.
Don't see what in putting a union in place, what that's going to do.
Well, let's talk about that because my recording is only telling me we have 10 minutes left on this. So because we decided to talk for 10 minutes ahead of time. But I wanted Chris to mention what are the things that why a union would work.
So we were fortunate in our managers, and except for the one that got removed, which you know why, but you're a bad person. Moving on. We were fortunate that we were able to work our schedules together, right? Not every store was able to do that. We were able to go ahead and say hey, we want mornings, we want that. So, that needs to be able to be bargained for. On top of that, we bargained for certain hour. Well, not bargained. We communicated that we wanted certain hours in the front end versus the back, so that we weren't all day on our feet versus all day in the back, right? So that was also talked about. Also our managers were very understanding with our sick time too, especially because quite literally we had the entire store sick one time, all of it, right?
There was one day it was only 2 geniuses. I was one of them, and everybody on the team was out, and it was just impossible to do repairs. Based on the amount of availability. Yeah, I do remember that, and eventually everybody got hit with it. Eventually I got nailed with it. So it was a good 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, right?
We were. Yeah, it was almost. Yeah, it was maybe almost a month and a half. It was a while because it just kept rounding its way around the store. It's disgusting. But on top of that, we also had managers that at times when we had simply too much work to repair in store, they'd be like, no, like, I'm sorry, we're going to stop taking your orders and go out to Depot, right? Like, and I can say all those that I've brought up, I've talked to other people when I was working there, and they didn't have the same experience at the stores, right? So unions are a result of piss poor leadership, in my opinion, like hands down. And that's not, and piss poor leadership isn't everywhere. So is it a cure-all solution? No. Is it a solution to, at least hit those very low standards that I, provided, that our stores provided? Yeah. I think, those aren't crazy bargains. And I'm not even bringing up money because, yes, I had a quarter. There was a year that I worked my ass off and I got a quarter raise, as in only 1/4 addition on my per hour, right? Which was ridiculous. So if they're able to bargain for those things, I can see how that can help. Outside of that,
right.
What about the things that Apple has in place? As an employee, you can call HR, you can call an anonymous arbitrator if you have a particular issue. You don't think any of those things work?
There were times where I contacted them about certain issues, and to be honest, we still had people that were doing issues still working there. So, because unfortunately, it depends on the HR representative, right? HR is there to protect the company at the end of the day, right? They're an arbitrator to make sure that the employee is happy and the company's not getting sued, right? That's what they're there for. And so if all those checks and balances fail, yeah, a union for that particular store may be necessary. Again, not everyone.
And what's the consequence going to be if someone wants to work at that store, but now they have to start paying union fees? They have to, go through a voting process for changes. Is someone going to want to work there?
Being a union.
I mean, there's 548 other stores they can go look towards.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's like
if that's the point, then you could say those people that are working there, hey, you don't like it there? There's 400 or 500 other stores you can go work at.
But regardless, the majority of them, 65 to 33,
right,
voted.
Yeah.
So if the number was closer to 50, or what was it? So was that's if 54? It was close to 50, something where it was barely, I'd be like, all right, that's a little fishy. But it was majority. And
well, there were some things in that video that they said bring dignity to the job. How's a union going to bring dignity to your job? The only person that can bring dignity to your job is you, and your attitude and your the way you go about your job. Now, I'm saying that you don't have, I don't want to call them grievances, but issues, okay? But, I mean, again, I worked in the corporate world for 41 years outside of Apple. And believe me, that shit happens as bad, if not worse, 10 times worse. And, it's going to be there wherever you go. To me, the video that they showed, it's just, for me, it's another example of the only reason they bring up Tim making $98 million is that they want to be a CEO without doing all of the work that's required for it.
People did question, what does Tim do to make that amount of money? Yeah, that was something.
So that's a bigger conversation.
That's not a retail store thing.
No, but that's a bigger conversation of any billionaire. Does any billionaire actually deserve their money, right? That's a much bigger question. Is there any type of effort that, because work times effort equals money, is there any type of work or effort that actually equals that type, right? And that's a much different conversation. The fact that they brought that up is just to get an emotional response out of it, which it worked, obviously. You're right, like that's why that video is posted everywhere. But again, if they're asking for those things, there had to have been a reason for that. And again, if we had, that one manager that was fired, if we had 12 more of her at the store, oopsie, I said her.
It's all right.
Well, that's your choice of pronoun for that person. That's not necessarily
right.
the gender of that person.
The individual that was there.
I like to say in my line of work, the user is always my favorite.
So if that store is full of those types of individuals as managers, oh my God, I would have unionized like 8 years ago. Like if I was that one guy who'd been there 10 years.
I had a couple of run-ins with a couple of individuals that I just, but again, like Will said last time, my experiences are a little different because I was part-time.
Right. And that was the thing that was different. And I think they do a lot of work for part-time employees. I think they give them a lot of things that most places don't give them.
In this country, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that is for sure. I think Apple gives a lot of stuff in general, like stock. We talked about everything that they get. My question is, would Apple take away something off the table that they normally give?
Sure.
To those input, like would they take away stock? Would they take away tuition?
That's called
compensation,
right? That's called negotiation, right?
They could.
Yeah,
they could negotiate those things away.
So that's my curiosity is what is Apple going to be responding? And there's going to be a point. I want to see that first paycheck where they got to pay all those fees and see in the end of the day if it's going to work out in their favor or not. And on the back end, what's going to be the ending result. So, Chris, I got to ask, if you were working in an Apple store and you decided that, yes, you wanted to unionize, based on your last experience, what would you ask for?
Based on my last experience and based on the fact that COVID could take me out of the store a lot more than it used to, because now we have the flu and COVID, not just the flu, right?
Right.
So more sick time, hands down. Paid sick time for COVID on a positive test. Also, if I have to take care of a family member that has it. Also, if
I think Apple did that. Did they do that with COVID testing?
They did. I don't know if it's still going on.
I don't know about that.
I can't remember. So that every quarter scheduling would be decided, right? So, granted, it could just be the same for everybody, but nonetheless, that's what I would ask for as well. What else would I ask for?
One of the things I was gonna, if I ever got in front of someone and say, every month that as a full-time employee, I deserve a Saturday and a Sunday off.
Yeah. So
Saturday or Saturday or
a weekend?
Sunday.
No, a weekend.
Yeah,
which is off.
It's crazy that we have to have this conversation about the weekend, because one of the first things that unions actually created was the weekend, right? 1870s, right? That's when.
Well, Frank knows about that. Frank, you were working around that time.
I was there. Yeah.
He was just coming out.
Hoffa was my best buddy.
Just coming out of the railroad working.
So now we know who to ask.
So, that. Honestly, if there's a quality program of any sort that's added, that needs to be consideration to pay raise as well, if it affects the amount of work I need to do, right? Because on a normal daily basis, screen repairs, now that they actually have the gauge screen repair system versus when we were working, it was some jack off saying 30 minutes in the front for everything, even if there was 600 displays.
Yeah.
That you remember how much I fought for that too.
We have a timing system. There's a system now that time. If people who don't know, the Genius part of this, I think, response from this battery program was the fact that they came out with a system that allowed us to know the estimated time of completion that way, instead of us just guessing based on how many phones are back there, because we would all wear headsets. They don't really wear them anymore, I think, because now they're able to communicate everything through the pad. But yeah, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, that, and I know this is a want that I wouldn't want really across every person's job in the United States, but extended maternity, paternity leave to that of other countries, because honestly, that time you get with your kid is just extremely precious. And I've been fortunate enough to my past job and even my current job is very, very good with that. And I know other countries have it that great as well. I just feel like with how many people that Apple employs, you can find people to jump between stores. They're doing it now, to be honest.
People switch stores all the time. I mean, we're all an example of that. We all, I think, moved to different stores. So
yeah, but I think Chris is referring to if, let's say Quaker Bridge is short geniuses to call Freehold or call Cherry Hill.
That has been done. Yeah,
they're doing that now for other reasons. Like, it depends what the reason is, but they are currently doing that, right? So those types of things, and the biggest one. The fact that raises were as shitty as they were, and opportunities for advancement were as shitty as they were, was ridiculous to me, right? By getting a genius to get a cert of any kind, the cheapest cert, Jamf cert, Kanji cert, whatever it is, $200 certs, and doing the exact same thing you were doing outside of Apple, nets you a 40 to 60% raise, right? So, and I'm not saying Apple to do that. I am saying that Apple is coming out with their own MDM solution at this point. You should go ahead and try to train those people in that and try to sell that as well and get those people, keep them in the company, give them more money to sell that product, and work with big companies to support them with that. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's the solution we talked about, Frank, where Apple's doing like the iCloud. It's for small businesses right now,
right.
But it's their own built system that it's not for everybody, but it's like it's more of a small business concept.
And they could ramp that up and support big businesses like Jamf 1,000%, right? And I think that's the next logical step for geniuses, because quite literally the fact that geniuses were either stay in the company, try to get a career experience, or completely change your job role and move to manager positions, which is not the same as a technical role.
No. Right. And that was my whole thing is that I didn't want to be a manager. I had my own videography business on the outside of Apple, which net me an extra over 10 to 16K.
Yeah.
Which is even like double that now. And you're telling me, like, in order for me to become a lead genius, and I would have to dedicate my entire 100% workforce to that, because I'm not going to be a manager and do that business on the side. I'm just not. Or I would significantly downgrade how many I do. But you got to be able to net me that amount of money in return.
That's a choice. That's a career path choice that you make.
Right. So, but I made that choice a long time ago, even before I was a genius. I started, I was doing this. I started my business back in 2012, and it wasn't until about maybe 2016 is when I started getting maybe like 10 weddings, 15 weddings. I started getting a lot, and that's when my mindset changed. And this is actually just right after I got married. It was. My mindset changed to the front for the first time. I'm waiting for my second one. I can't wait, and I'm going to film it and I'm going to, record it.
8
at
drones
the same time.
Flying at the same time.
Yeah, 8 drones flying, getting every angle.
No one can hear anything.
Yeah. Well, what song are they playing? No, I just hear a bunch of freaking wings. And, but my point is that I started gaining. And not everyone has the same side business as me. It's not the same. But for my situation, I was like, well, I'm only going to be a genius. And I almost kind of like accepted the fact that maybe that's the most I was going to be at that point, because they didn't give a crap about the creatives. I'm not going to be a lead. I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to be a manager in the job I'm at now. I'm very comfortable being a really good hand, come up with some great ideas, plus do what I do on the side, and I'm fine with that. And I also now I work Monday through Friday 8 to 5, and I get to take off up to 28 days a year for my PTO. Apple took me 10 years to get 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, and I know Apple can't, work into every type of role, but I think that the expansion of geniuses into something more than just either be a genius or leave.
Right, yeah. Like, you have to go all the way up to that. Yeah, because that's the best pay you're going to get.
Right, and it's weird because retail, everything else in the retail store was retail, but geniuses weren't. It was strange.
Right. When I was playing in the band and I was working at the publishing house, it got to a point where, I had to either, if I wanted to progress into management or whatever, I had to make a choice. Am I going to continue to rehearse 7 nights a week, or do I want to spend more time in the office honing the skill set that I need to do to work up through management? So those kinds of things are business choices that you make for your career. So I mean, it's no different anywhere else.
Yeah, except if you're working as a sales specialist, expert, lead, and that kind of stuff, that very much entails with retail. So the natural progression of that role is manager, senior manager, store lead, etc. The natural progression of technical specialist and genius is that's it. It's just those two, and they're while they're in a retail store, they're like.
Well, don't you think that there are corporate corporate positions that you could apply for?
Sure. I mean, AppleCare would be a natural progression.
Well,
but the problem is with AppleCare is I don't think they get paid as much.
They don't. I actually interviewed for a position on the Apple business. What was that, tier 3, I guess, right? And then I looked into it further, and they were only making $58,000, right? And the total cap for that position, if you manage that team, was likely I think it was 82 or something, right? It regardless, the path of leaving Apple was more beneficial and is still more beneficial to geniuses than to stay. And I'm not saying like, all right, Apple, rework your entire thing. I am saying, hey, Apple, like, at the very least, you have an MDM solution. You have customers that want to use it. Work your geniuses into that, and then they become what Will and I do now. It would make perfect sense for them, and those people would be happy. And the best part is, Apple gets more customers then. Because if they're supporting small businesses with that stuff, that's a fantastic experience.
I mean, that's the thing about the genius role, is that there is a limitation of where you can go if you don't want to be a manager. And you can't you can expand your skills because you're always going to get new OSs, you're always going to get new hardware. But that's not going to, but the computer's still going to have the same parts no matter what the computer is. So when I was going for creative, like, one of the things you could do is pro apps, right? We were able to do Aperture and Logic and Final Cut, and even FileMaker. So there were opportunities, but you can't go beyond what Apple has. You can't do Photoshop, can't do Pro Tools. Obviously, that's a competitor of Apple. They wouldn't let you. Why can't, when we had the one-to-one around, why can't that be something to talk about? They love to promote their apps on the App Store and actually infuse them into some things, into some trainings, but why wasn't, like a perfect example, Procreate, right? That was something, right? You teach Procreate, right?
Yeah.
Like, Procreate is built from Apple, basically. They have to thank Apple for that. But I think one of the things you did is you taught Procreate, right?
Yeah, we could. Well, yeah, we did. Yes,
yeah,
we did.
Why couldn't that be the case when one-to-one was around?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's
one of the things that I always thought that the crew, I talked with a couple of the creatives that, we wanted to go out because Apple always talked
Right.
about becoming part of the community.
Yep.
Well, we wanted to contact different groups that wanted to have sessions on photography or whatever. And why can't we go out to these groups? Why does it have to be because we fought with the management. We had a photo group who actually wanted to have sessions at least once a month for their club. And they said, no. And I said, I don't get that. Why?
Because they want the community to be in the store, not out.
Well, I understand that. I mean, they wanted it in the store, but they said, no, it's for the individuals. I said, but they are individuals.
Yeah,
but it's
and at the same time, stores in California were going outside with their with their individuals far outside.
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
Parks.
Yeah.
So like it was, I think, if unions don't show up in all Apple, I hope at the very least Apple examines what the natural progression of each role is at retail to provide these people with the proper support and moving up, because paying somebody more money but not taking on any more roles, like exponentially more money, it's hard to do to justify. Like I get it. Give them more stuff to do. Give them harder roles. Help them move up. You for sure have the ability.
And don't create extensions like creative. Then there's a pro creative, a creative pro. Like there was no difference. I don't care what anybody says to me. There was no difference between those at all. And it was.
Well, I think it was the amount of experience.
Yeah, but then have them go to corporate. Then have them go to corporate, and have them make the guides that actually, that we use to learn them.
Yeah,
those are the people you should hire. Like that's an example of it where the family room people should go to a corporate level at some point and get paid more for that. But also that requires them to move, because that requires moving fees and stuff like that.
Well, kind of, right? We're in a remote world. I've been remote now for 2 years.
But that's relatively new phenomenon.
For sure. Oh yeah, for sure. And the funny thing, I talked to somebody who worked at Apple, who's working at Apple, and because the work from home stance that Apple had, and a lot of people leaving those jobs, they actually have a lot of career experiences that they're taking in for people, right, to move into different positions, which it's kind of like a funny side effect. But especially because the people doing the career experiences are 100% remote.
Yeah, right.
So it's like,
it's ironic, isn't it? It's like defeats the purpose.
Well, I mean, they're paying them less, so.
Right, that's true. But I thought this was a very interesting discussion to talk about unions. I don't think every Apple store. Obviously, you're right. Not every Apple store needs this.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, obviously, I think the store leader of that Townsend store probably needs to get something addressed of how this could have happened, because I don't think that person's going to stay. I just don't see it. Why was it not addressed? But this is going to go for, we talked about, I think, a Georgia store, a New York City store is talking about doing this. So there are more to come. But I also think we should wait and see what happens at this Townsend store and to see what's the bargain. What are they going to get, and what are they going to lose?
My biggest thing with these videos that they're putting out now, they are still not listing
what they want,
the advantages of going to a union. All it is propaganda. They're just saying, oh, well, we have these issues and blah. Well, let's talk about what Apple gives you. Yeah. And what you're proposing, the union is going to give you over and above that. I think that would be a more solidified argument than to just,
I would love just a list. Just give me a list.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, like put the list online. Like if obviously you went public and talked about
dignity to your job. I don't think so.
Also, Chris, did you hear the union they're joining?
No.
Tell them, Frank.
I'm trying to. It's the Machinists Union.
Okay.
IAMA. I think it's called.
It's like
aeronautics and engineering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's this city based in again? What's the town? What's this? Was it Boston?
No.
Maryland.
Maryland. So
The union is based out of. Oh shit! I forget.
I'm only wondering because I think Maryland actually has it's either Lockheed Martin or Boeing.
Yes. Right.
So they're the union there basically.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how does that tie into retail?
Nothing. It does nothing.
I don't
It has
get
nothing
that.
to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, based on that, it's probably based on just on location, and that's the only reason why.
No, there's got to be more to it. Come on, it's got to be more to it than locations.
What were the depot repair facilities? Do you remember them? Carlisle,
Pennsylvania. The one in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I know of.
One in Austin.
Definitely Austin, obviously. Those are the two I remember.
Yeah, and they might have, because my whole thought is, I have zero idea what the hell their working situation is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it better? Is it worse? Do they have actual time off? Like, I feel like we need to know, because if we can gauge, those guys are 100% tech roles. They don't talk to a single customer, right? So I think if we're trying to gauge what makes sense for geniuses who are, customer facing, but also do the same thing as those guys in Carlisle at a much lesser amount. What's those guys' work life at? Like, what's that like? Because
isn't that something that I guess they kind of brought up too a little bit? I mean, they were talking more about China than they were about. But it's a third-party company. That's not Apple's decision. That is a different company. You know,
but they still have to go by the same standard agreement. So what's their standard agreement?
Sure.
Right.
They have the code of conduct for.
Sorry, that's it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, but listen, I don't care what union you are. It would be an excruciating stretch to compare Apple retail to any of those third party.
I think the ones in Asia and the ones in Asia at least. The ones in the US you could compare to. Like without a doubt, because I remember talking to what was it, the Watch Depot one. It's like it's intense work, but it's also semi-automated, which at the same time is kind of like the ones in Hong Kong, right? Like
Foxconn and
well, and there's another company too. For example, like it's just people on a line using a machine that does like 80% of the work for them, right? Mm-hmm. But in insane quantities, right?
Right. They're just kind of monitoring the assembly line.
Yeah. So I would be very curious about what if you want to compare yourself to other places that work like that, let's find out what they do too. Let's figure out what their working situation is like.
Well, it won't be at Simply Mac, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Simply Mac was a subsidiary of GameStop that was a authorized retailer that just recently announced they are closing every single Simply Mac.
Yeah, and
by the way, you can't have
are greatly sad.
Yeah, there was nothing about that store that made it worth going to. And I'll be honest, I don't think a third-party Apple store works anyway. Other than a Best Buy, which now they're not. I mean, they're technically.
Well, they're just transactions.
But if you are, there's no. I just don't think there's going to be a standalone Apple third-party store ever that'll ever succeed to a high level. I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah,
Apple doesn't let them, and Apple doesn't let them either. Might I also add to that?
I think it depends. In this country, it's a little bit different because in other countries they have much different rules. Right. India, for example, is different on how they have to sell their phones. There's a certain amount of presence of manufacturing that needs to be done there too.
Yep.
But for sure,
Apple went and abided by that, by the way, because they're manufacturing.
Yeah,
phones
but
there.
if we try to do that here, geez,
I think
it's all about the money, my man.
The only thing we make The only thing we assemble here is Mac Pros.
Right.
And iMac Pros, maybe.
But the parts are made but the parts are made in China, but they are assembled here.
It's no different than our automobiles.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
And it depends on manufacturer, right? Because like BMW has a big plant in South Carolina.
Yep.
Hyundai has.
And you know why they did that? They don't have to pay the import duties.
Yeah.
Okay, so sense. I mean, come on.
Smart business.
Yeah,
that's just business, man.
But I would rather have the factories here.
Of course.
If they can make it make sense.
It'll make sense, but then we have to pay a premium for that.
We're paying the premium anyway. We're paying 800% over what the manufacturing cost is of these things. They can afford it.
That's called business, everybody. But to not keep the podcast or the video long, but I wanted to thank you, Chris, for coming on and talking about.
Yeah, always happy to.
Fun topic. You know, we tried to get Tim Santoro, but he has no idea what the hell's going on at all. So he's getting married, and so he's got other things to worry about than other stuff. How's your kid doing, by the way?
Oh, she's freaking awesome, man. She's just so much fun.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, but I'm sure you know this, but I'm officially, the Father's Day champion of the world. I got this on Father's Day, so if you want to challenge me for the Father's Day Heavyweight Championship, which is the only one in the world, this is the one you can go after if you want.
The question is, how many episodes of Bluey have you memorized?
On that note, we're going to say goodbye to Chris. But Frank, thanks for coming on. I always appreciate what you have no choice because you make a lot of money with our YouTube side. Yeah. But we appreciate you guys going to our YouTube. Please check out our videos. Chris should subscribe if he's not, but he will now after today.
Listen, I'll give you a chat next week when I'm in Vegas. I'll let you know what's happening there, Will. Maybe you can drum up some video, but there's always women out there looking to be videoed.
Okay. Anyway, just don't buy that 13-inch MacBook Pro. I appreciate you guys very much for coming on.
July, 2 days.
Yep, and the new Air is coming. 2 days. You can pre-order that Air, and we will see you guys. And I love every single one of you.
Take care, guys. Take care.